What compels an individual to cross a line so horrifying that it shatters their very essence and echoes through the lives of everyone around them? In the heart of a seemingly loving marriage, one called Jessica and Michael Thompson, the bonds of trust and affection dissolved into a nightmare of violence and betrayal. When passion ignites into desperation and love transforms into fear, what occurs when one partner perceives the other as a looming threat instead of a beloved companion? As we unravel the chilling layers of this true story, we venture into the haunting reality of a tragic romance that spiraled into darkness. Where love once thrived, now only pain and regret remain. In a quiet suburb in the United States, a seemingly normal couple with dreams and aspirations found themselves teetering on the edge of despair. Jessica and Michael Thompson were known to friends and family as the epitome of happiness, a devoted pair navigating the trials of life together. Yet beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Financial struggles began to erode the once solid foundation of their marriage. Feeling an urgent need to secure their future, Jessica made the life-altering decision to sell their properties, an action intended to bring stability. However, Michael perceived this move as a betrayal, a breach of trust that threatened the very dreams they had built together. As desperation tightened its grip, what unfolded became a harrowing tale of betrayal, leaving their community in shock and casting a long shadow of darkness long after the crime was committed. This is a story of love transformed into fear, ultimately leading to a fateful decision that would forever change their lives. Join us as we explore the intricate web of emotions that often underlie such tragedies. We will delve into the complexities of love turned sour, the devastating impact of financial strain, and the destructive power of unchecked anger. Through interviews, expert analyses, and a deep examination of the events that led to this shocking crime, we aim to shine a light on the harsh realities that can lie just beneath the surface of a seemingly perfect marriage. This is a cautionary tale about the fragility of human relationships, the depth of betrayal, and the lasting consequences of a single moment of rage. As we untangle this harrowing narrative, we invite you to reflect on the importance of communication, understanding, and compassion in our own lives, a journey that reminds us to cherish those we hold dear before a moment of darkness forever changes the light. Meet Jessica and Michael Thompson, a couple whose love story appeared to be straight out of a romantic novel. They first crossed paths in college, both studying finance at State University. Jessica was a bright and ambitious young woman with dreams of making a mark in the corporate world, while Michael was charismatic and down-to-earth, charming those around him with his easy smile and sense of humor. Their connection was instantaneous, and their relationship quickly blossomed. As they navigated through their college years, they shared moments that became cherished memories. Their first date at a quaint local cafe, spontaneous road trips to state parks, and late-night study sessions that turned into long conversations about their dreams. After graduation, fueled by love and ambition, they tied the knot in a beautifully intimate ceremony, attended by close family and friends. With hopes for a bright future ahead, they embarked on their journey as partners in life. In the years that followed, Jessica and Michael built a life together filled with shared aspirations. They purchased their first home in a quiet district. It was a modest, charming 3-bedroom house with a white picket fence and a small garden where Jessica spent countless hours planting flowers. They often celebrated their milestones, Michael's promotions at work, Jessica's successful projects, and even small victories like anniversaries and holidays. However, as time progressed, their relaxing launch began to face the tests of reality. As their lives intertwined, so did their finances. Initially, they thrived professionally, but like many young couples, they soon encountered the pressures of adulthood. The global financial crisis hit just after they purchased their first home, affecting Michael's job in the real estate sector. As commissions dwindled, Michael became increasingly anxious about their financial stability. The couple began to experience a shift in their lifestyle, dining out less, postponing vacations, and scaling back on personal expenses. Despite these challenges, Jessica opted to pursue a career in corporate finance, believing her income could offset some of the financial strain. However, juggling two demanding careers, combined with increasing debt from home renovations and credit cards, proved to be a daunting task. They began to rely on credit for daily expenses, quickly accumulating a mountain of bills that became suffocating. With each month, the burden only grew heavier, and their conversation shifted from dreams of future prosperity to urgent discussions about budgets and payments. In a desperate attempt to regain control, Jessica suggested selling some of their properties, investments they had purchased together when times were better. To her, it seemed logical. Using the profits could alleviate their financial anxiety and provide a buffer against the looming threats of foreclosure on their home. However, Michael viewed this as a betrayal, an abandonment of the life they had built together. The tension mounted, and what once felt like a partnership in navigating life became a battleground of stubbornness and resentment. Jessica's personality was defined by her drive and independence. She was ambitious and forward-thinking, always seeking new challenges in her career and personal life. Her friends often described her as a go-getter, someone who didn't shy away from hard work. Yet beneath her confident exterior lay the scars of doubt and fear. The mounting financial pressures forced Jessica to project an image of strength. However, internally, she struggled with feelings of inadequacy and the overwhelming weight of responsibility for their fiscal health. Michael, on the other hand, was nurturing yet sensitive. An intuitive man, he valued relationships deeply and often prioritized his loved one's happiness above his own. He was the type of person who thrived in social settings, finding joy in making others laugh and feel comfortable. However, the pressures of their financial difficulties began to erode his easygoing nature. Michael became consumed by anxiety, retreating into himself and expressing frustration through silence. The emotional shift did not go unnoticed by Jessica, who felt the growing distance in their relationship. Their contrasting approaches to life, their dreams and aspirations, while once complementary, became a source of contention. Jessica's focus on practical solutions met resistance from Michael's idealism. Past grievances resurfaced as the couple became mired in their struggles. Unmet expectations, broken promises, and the losses that came with neglecting their emotional connection flown into an atmosphere fraught with misunderstandings. As the weeks turned into months, Jessica became increasingly aware that their financial situation was deteriorating. The weight of mounting debts began to feel like a heavy shroud enveloping their once vibrant home. Bills arrived with relentless regularity, and each reminder of their financial struggles chipped away at the dreams they had built. Driven by a fierce determination to regain control over their lives, Jessica started to explore options to alleviate their financial burdens. She decided to sell a few of their investment properties, assets they had once envisioned as stepping stones to greater prosperity. The decision felt monumental to Jessica. It was a move she believed could provide the kind of relief that would allow them to focus on rebuilding their lives. With painstaking research, she outlined a plan for selling their properties, each carefully picked for its market value and potential profit. When she first broached the subject with Michael over dinner, she was met with silence, a heavy, piercing lull that lingered in the air between them. Jessica, sensing his apprehension, pressed on, detailing how the funds from the sales could help pay off debts and stabilize their finances. However, Michael's reaction was unexpected and explosive. From his perspective, the properties represented more than just financial assets. They were symbols of hope, legacy, and the future they had dreamed of together. "You can't just sell everything we worked for," he shouted, the frustration boiling over into anger. This wasn't just about money for him. It was about their collective identity. He accused Jessica of making unilateral decisions without considering how much these properties meant to both of them. A fracture formed in the foundation of their marriage that neither could see coming, but both could feel. As Jessica pressed ahead with her plans, the atmosphere in their home grew increasingly volatile. What had once been small arguments about money transformed into frequent volatile confrontations. One evening after Jessica returned from a long day of property viewings, Michael confronted her over dinner. The conversation quickly escalated. "Do you even care what this is doing to us?" he asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. "You're just throwing everything away as if it doesn't matter." "I'm trying to fix our future, Michael. That's all I care about," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "If we don't do something, we'll lose everything anyway." In the weeks that followed, their arguments began to highlight their deeply rooted frustrations, transforming into a cycle of blame and attacks. The intimacy they once shared faded. Meaningful communication was replaced by barbed comments and defensive posturing. An emotional distance began to grow, with both partners retreating into their own worlds, Jessica fiercely pursuing her property sales, and Michael withdrawing into silence. Each ignored phone call or cold glance deepened the chasm between them. Friends and family began to notice the shift in their relationship. Social gatherings became strained. Conversations designed to be joyful turned awkward as Jessica and Michael grappled with unresolved tension bubbling beneath the surface. Jessica's friends expressed concern over her well-being, sensing the strain and urging her to reconsider her approach. Still, she felt convinced that the sacrifices would ultimately save their marriage. Yet every successful sale seemed to solidify Michael's anger, each transaction deepening the rift rather than healing it. Miscommunication became an insidious presence in their lives. With each house sold, Jessica believed she was easing their financial woes, hopeful that she would eventually bring peace back into their home. Michael, on the other hand, felt utterly blindsided. It felt as if her decisions were chipping away at his role and value in their marriage. They had always navigated decisions together, yet now they seemed to exist in separate realities, disconnected by their perspectives. The root of their issues lay not only in disagreements over money, but also in their failure to articulate their feelings effectively. Instead of expressing vulnerability, they chose to shield their fears behind anger, frustration, and resentment. Michael felt emasculated as the traditional provider, while Jessica became increasingly isolated, feeling as though she had to shoulder the responsibility alone. What was once a partnership became a battleground for miscommunication. Small things like choosing to go out with friends instead of discussing the stress at home created ripples of hurt. Michael began to vent his frustrations in passive-aggressive remarks, while Jessica felt her contributions were continually minimized. The more they hurt each other, the more they withdrew, leading to emotional isolation that magnified their pain. As they approached the final sale of their most significant property, a confrontation was inevitable. The evening was tense. Both had been poaching over the unresolved issues that had turned their home into a war zone. The heat of the moment burst forth, igniting an explosion of emotions. Michael accused Jessica of prioritizing money over their marriage, while Jessica called into question Michael's lack of support and refusal to take action for their future. In the culmination of these interactions, it became increasingly clear that their ability to communicate had deteriorated to a dangerous level. Each snippet of dialogue was laced with bitterness, as unspoken feelings of betrayal and disappointment coalesced into an emotional storm. That evening, as the argument peaked, Jessica slammed her hands on the table, her voice trembling with frustration. "I'm doing everything I can. You just don't see that I'm trying to save us." Michael's face flushed with anger, and he shot back. "Saving us? You're tearing us apart. You've turned our home into a business, and I don't even recognize what we've become anymore." The clash risen into accusations and wounds reopened, throwing their relationship into chaos. Rather than solving the issue at hand, their exchange drove a deeper wedge between them. After that night, Michael's bitterness transformed into near-constant resentment, while Jessica felt increasingly alone in her struggle to maintain what she believed was best. They began to share the same space, yet felt light years apart, emotions boiling just beneath the surface, ready to erupt at any moment. As weeks passed, their home, once a sanctuary, morphed into a battlefield. Friends grew concerned as they noticed the gradual disintegration of the Thompsons. Social gatherings became a charade, with the couple putting on smiles that masked the tension steeping behind closed doors. Conversations were superficial, avoiding the elephant in the room, Jessica's ongoing property sales, their crumbling financial situation, and the silent march toward a looming crisis in their marriage. The stress seeped into every aspect of their lives. Michael found solace in night shifts at work, immersing himself in long hours to escape the suffocating weight of home. Jessica, feeling abandoned, threw herself deeper into her work, convincing herself that if she could just sell one more property, perhaps her efforts would restore some semblance of balance to their lives. Yet every successful transaction felt like a hollow victory, an achievement that only served to widen the gap between them rather than close it. Jessica longed for moments of connection, but any attempt to bridge the divide was met with Michael's icy indifference. Even simple acts like asking about his day or expressing concern resulted in curt responses that stung with neglect. Their communication devolved into a painful cycle. She would reach out, he would retreat, and the cycle repeated. Each missed opportunity to reconnect deepened Jessica's isolation, pushing her further down a path of uncertainty and despair. It was a chilly autumn evening when everything changed for Jessica and Michael Thompson. The air felt thick with tension, and the fading light cast ominous shadows in their home, an environment that had transformed from one of love and warmth to a suffocating reminder of their profound discord. On that fateful day, Jessica was preparing herself for what she hoped would be a fresh start, convinced that completing the sale of their last property would finally lift the pressing weight from their shoulders. Having finalized the sale earlier that afternoon, Jessica returned home buoyed by a sense of accomplishment, eager to present her triumph to Michael in hopes that it might provide him some relief. However, her excitement was dimmed by the memory of their last explosive argument, where feelings of neglect and betrayal had taken center stage. She resolved to approach Michael gently, ready to share the good news in a way that would bridge their chasm. Michael, on the other hand, was grappling with his own demons. His quiet withdrawal had grown darker, swallowing the charm and enthusiasm that once characterized his spirit. The financial strain, coupled with loss of trust, left him feeling cornered. The horror of betrayal weighed heavily on him. He could not comprehend how Jessica could seemingly prioritize monetary gains over their emotional well-being. That evening, rather than comforting thoughts, anger simmered within him as he paced anxiously around the house, waiting for his wife's return. When Jessica arrived home, she was met not with the warmth she longed for, but an icy silence. As she entered the home, she immediately sensed something was off. The memorabilia of their once happy life together felt specter-like, each photograph representing a time that seemed to belong to another world. Michael sat on the couch, fixed on the television, but evidently lost in thought. "Michael?" Jessica tried to inject warmth into her voice, stepping closer. "I sold the last property. We can pay off the debts now." Michael turned slowly to face her, and the moment their eyes locked, an old and familiar tension spiraled back into the room. "You think that somehow fixes this?" he said coldly, his voice heavy with disbelief. "You continue to act like everything is fine just because you made a sale. You're living in a fantasy." "No, I'm trying to help us survive," she shot back, her frustration beginning to swell. What followed was a vicious exchange of harsh words, grievances, and accusations, a relentless barrage that cut deeper than either could have anticipated. The heat of their argument escalated as old wounds were reopened once again. The couple stood facing one another, each accusing the other of inflicting emotional pain. In that moment, Jessica sensed Michael's anger shift into a frightening intensity. The man she had loved seemed to morph before her eyes into someone vastly different, fueled by rage and feelings of betrayal. In a moment of heated emotion, Michael, red in the face and filled with an overwhelming sense of despair, stormed to the kitchen to clear his head. That space had become increasingly off-limits. It was where Jessica had spent hours during the property sales, planning for the future, and was now a zone of conflict. As he walked toward the kitchen, he felt an irreversible tide rising within him, a shape-shifting storm that clouded his judgment. Jessica followed him, hoping to de-escalate the situation, but her voice fell on deaf ears. In a sudden fit of rage, Michael reached into the kitchen drawer where he had kept a hunting knife used for home repairs. It was a moment of impulse, an eruption of years of pent-up emotional turmoil and frustration compressed into a singular, tragic action. His mind raced as he grasped the handle, the conflict transmuting into something unthinkably violent. Witness statements / police reports. In those shocking seconds, the unthinkable happened. As Jessica approached him, pleading for him to listen, Michael turned to face her, and in a blind moment of rage, he struck. The blade caught Jessica by surprise, and in a split second, everything changed. The world around them faded, replaced by a horror that neither could comprehend. The startling noise of the knife's impact echoed through the small house, and in an instant, horror replaced the fighting. Jessica collapsed to the ground, clutching her wound as confusion and disbelief shadowed Michael's face. What had he just done? The cries of regret and desperation tore through the air as he dropped the knife, stepping back in shock, unable to process the magnitude of his actions. In the chaos, neighbors heard Jessica's anguished cries and rushed to the scene. One neighbor, a longtime friend named Karen, had been outside walking her dog and ran to their door when she heard the commotion inside. Karen knocked frantically, her heart racing. When there was no reply, she pushed the door open, only to stumble upon the horrifying scene that had unfolded in the living room. In her statement to the police later that evening, Karen recounted the chaos she witnessed. When I opened the door, I immediately saw Jessica on the floor. She was clutching her side, and there was blood everywhere. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It felt surreal, she recalled, her voice trembling with shock. Michael was standing there, backing away, a look of pure horror on his face. I yelled for someone to call 911. Within minutes, emergency services arrived at the scene. The paramedics rushed in, assessing Jessica's condition. The gravity of the situation enveloped the home, and the once quiet district began to erupt with flashing lights, sirens, and a flurry of activity. Michael stood at a distance, paralyzed by the revelation of his actions, unable to fathom the consequences of that singular moment of violence. The police arrived shortly thereafter, entering the scene with urgency. They found Jessica lying on the floor, conscious but growing increasingly weak, her breaths uneven and labored. Paramedics began to work swiftly, stabilizing her condition while police officers managed the rapidly escalating situation. They asked Michael for an account of what had occurred, but his words were disjointed fragments of panic and disbelief. I didn't mean to, he stammered, tears streaming down his face. It wasn't supposed to happen. It was just anger. His words fell flat as the weight of the reality sank deeper, and he could see the horror reflected in the eyes of the officers around him. Witness testimonies varied in their accounts of Michael's behavior. Some described him as a distraught husband, shaken by the unfolding tragedy, while others noted a chilling detachment that accompanied his reactions to the reality of his actions. As they began to piece together the incidents leading up to the attack, investigators consulted the call logs, including recent entries that revealed escalating tensions in the couple's relationship. The coroner's report later detailed the severity of Jessica's injuries, a deep stab wound to her abdomen that had caused significant internal damage. Rushed into emergency surgery, Jessica fought for her life, while Michael was taken into custody, placed in the back of a squad car, his world collapsing around him. The immediate aftermath of the attack sent shockwaves through the Thompson family and their community. Jessica's parents, who lived only a few streets away, were abruptly informed that their daughter had been critically injured. Racing to the hospital, they braced themselves for the worst. In the waiting room, they clung to hope as they awaited news about Jessica's condition. The atmosphere was thick with anxiety, overshadowed by the reality of what had taken place in their daughter's home. Michael's arrest was equally terrifying for Jessica's family, who could not reconcile the image of their once adorable son-in-law with that of a man accused of such a horrific act. Friends and family began to pour into the hospital, offering support but grappling with disbelief. How could this have happened? Those who had gathered to support one another found themselves in a nightmare scenario, attempting to process the violence that had shattered not only the couple, but the sense of safety within their community. As news of the incident leaked to the local media, the story began to dominate headlines. Local couples' financial struggles lead to tragic stabbing read the bold headlines across newspapers and local news stations. The narrative quickly shifted into discussions about domestic violence, mental health, and the hidden struggles that plague seemingly normal individuals. Reporters contacted friends, neighbors, and former colleagues, seeking insight into what could lead to such a harrowing event. Meanwhile, in the sterile, dimly lit surgical room, Jessica underwent hours of critical surgery. The medical staff worked skillfully to stabilize her condition, but the uncertainty loomed, lingering like an invisible specter. Jessica's family could do nothing but wait and pray for her survival. In the shadows of the waiting room, Michael sat alone in his holding cell, contemplating the catastrophic consequences of that single moment of rage. Though he came to understand the weight of the choice he had made, it felt like a distant realization in a world where everything had turned dark. Would Jessica survive? Would people ever understand how one small moment could lead to irrevocable damage? The questions haunted him, the uncertainty a gnawing companion in his solitude. As Jessica fought for her life, the community around them began to question the factors that contributed to the situation. Friends who had once been oblivious to the couple's struggles began piecing together jarring clues that had led to the fatal confrontation. Forgetting to communicate their fears while silently battling the mental burdens they both carried, left them isolated and vulnerable. The emotional cost of neglecting to address domestic strain manifested in a tragic culmination that would change lives forever. In the coming days, as the story unfolded, Michael would find himself faced with the devastating consequences of his actions. The prosecution would build a case against him, using the backdrop. In the coming days, as the story unfolded, Michael would find himself faced with the devastating consequences of his actions. The prosecution would build a case against him, using the backdrop of their fractured relationship to illustrate the events that led to the tragic mourning. Counselors and therapists would be consulted to provide insights into the psychological state of both partners, emphasizing how unaddressed financial stress and emotional turmoil can manifest into violence. As media coverage continued to grow, community members offered their opinions on the case, with many expressing shock that something so violent could occur within what seemed to be a loving marriage. "There were no signs," echoed frequently in conversations, reflecting a broader societal belief that domestic strife must always present visible markers, but violence can lurk in the shadows, obscured by the everyday struggles of life. Jessica's condition remained critical but stable, and her family rallied around her, determined to provide support as she recovered from the harrowing ordeal. They remained hopeful, holding on to the belief that her strong spirit would pull her through. Hospital visits turned into brief family reunions. Loving messages were shared, all while keeping vigilant for any signs of her recovery. Meanwhile, Michael sat in a small, stark holding cell. The weight of remorse enveloped him, yet he found himself wrestling with conflicting emotions. He deeply understood the horror of his actions, but struggled to reconcile that understanding with the deep-seated feelings of betrayal and disillusionment that had fueled the confrontation. In his isolation, thoughts of Jessica being in the hospital filled him with guilt. He thought back to their happier times together, the laughter, shared dreams, and plans for the future that now felt like distant memories shrouded in sorrow. As the initial court dates approached, the legal proceedings began to draw closer scrutiny. Lawyers debated whether the charges against Michael should involve murder or a lesser charge, presenting it as a momentary lapse triggered by intense emotional distress. Reams of evidence, including witness testimonies and social media posts from the couple prior to the incident, became crucial pieces to help the court understand the underlying dynamics of their relationship. Friends and family were called upon to testify, sharing stories that painted a complex portrait of the Thompsons' marriage, one filled with moments of joy interwoven with struggles that had been hidden from view. Jessica's friends expressed how she had confided in them about her worries over their finances, but also her desire to save their relationship at all costs. Michael's family searched for ways to explain his actions, emphasizing that he had always been kind, protective, and loving, traits that seemed at odds with his violent outburst. In the midst of this turmoil, Jessica began to show signs of resilience. Though she faced a long and painful recovery process, her spirit remained unbroken. The medical team provided updates to her family, revealing that she had made significant strides in her recovery, gradually regaining strength and determination in the face of adversity. With each passing day, she took one step closer to rejoining her family and beginning the long road to healing. As news broke that Jessica was awake and responsive, the media coverage shifted. Stories of survival began to replace those of tragedy, shining a light on the importance of mental health, open communication, and support systems within relationships. Jessica's recovery became a symbol of hope, a reminder that resilience and healing were possible even after profound loss and trauma. Meanwhile, Michael prepared to face the legal system, confronted with the reality of what he had done. The court dates loomed, and with each passing day, emotions ran high. Fear, regret, shame, and confusion danced in a delicate balance, intermixing with the hope for forgiveness. Friends, family, and the greater community began to host discussions about domestic abuse, the impacts of financial strain within relationships, and the urgent need for emotional support, seeking to transform tragedy into a catalyst for understanding and change. As the court proceedings drew closer, whispers of collective healing floated in the air around the community, marking a complex intersection of personal stories intertwined with broader societal reflections. The journey ahead for both Jessica and Michael would be fraught with challenges, and the marks of the tragedy would linger like shadows. But through resilience, community support, and a commitment to addressing the factors that lead to such devastating moments, there existed a glimmer of hope, a possibility for understanding and transformation in the aftermath of pain. In the wake of Jessica's near-fatal incident, the legal system was called upon to adjudicate Michael's actions. The judicial process in cases of domestic violence is complex and often fraught with challenges. The system has made strides in recent years to improve responses to such incidents, but there remains a significant amount of room for reform. In this case, as legal proceedings began, both prosecution and defense sought to navigate the intricate layers of Michael's emotional state and the context surrounding his actions. The prosecution argued that Michael's actions were a result of conscious choices made in a moment of unchecked rage. They highlighted the need to hold him accountable for what they categorically defined as a deliberate act of violence against his wife. The defense, however, contended that Michael had been under immense psychological distress, suggesting that the long-standing pressures and conflict within their relationship played a crucial role in his momentary lapse of judgment. This defense aimed to save sympathy by framing Michael as a man overwhelmed by life's circumstances rather than a cold-blooded criminal. Critics of the judicial process point to the challenges victimized individuals face when navigating legal systems that have historically failed to provide adequate support or protection. Many domestic violence cases are often viewed through the lens of personal culpability, neglecting the broader context, financial strain, emotional disturbances, mental health issues that may contribute to violent incidents. Advocates argue for reforms that prioritize victim support, comprehensive mental health assessments, and the consideration of contextual factors in the judicial process. With the complexities of mental health and emotional distress present, the case drew attention to the need for a more nuanced approach. Changes within the legal framework could allow for more rehabilitative options rather than solely punitive measures. Many experts are advocating for legislation that not only aims to punish but also focuses on mental health education, prevention programs, and community outreach to heal both victims and perpetrators. As both Jessica and Michael navigate their paths forward, the complexities of their story reflect broader societal challenges that require examination and reform. Jessica's recovery journey may empower her to become an advocate for victims of domestic violence, sharing her story to educate others about the dire consequences of emotional neglect and the importance of mental health resources. She might find her voice as a beacon of hope, inspiring others to seek help and recognize the signs of emotional distress within their relationships. For Michael, the process of facing his actions, grappling with remorse, and understanding the underlying issues he faced would be essential for meaningful rehabilitation. His journey might involve participating in counseling and support groups tailored toward men, addressing emotional expressiveness and conflict resolution. Understanding the roots of his anger and learning healthier coping mechanisms could become vital elements of his journey toward accountability and growth. Ultimately, the story of Jessica and Michael Thompson shatters the illusion of domestic tranquility, exposing the fragile nature of relationships under pressure and presenting an opportunity for society to reevaluate its approach to domestic violence. It serves as a haunting reminder that beneath the surface of each relationship lies a spectrum of experiences, some bright and hopeful, others dark and tragic, that demand compassion, understanding, and action. As we reflect on the events of their story, we are compelled to question how we, as individuals and as a society, can foster safer environments where open communication is prioritized, where mental health is treated with the seriousness it deserves, and where victims are never left to face their struggles alone. Jessica's and Michael's journey invites us all to explore the many layers of relationships, hold space for those impacted by violence, and commit to creating a future where love, understanding, and empathy can prevail over anger and despair. Lastly, if you found this content impactful, please consider subscribing to our channel. Join us as we continue to explore important topics that highlight the complexities of human experiences and promote understanding in our world. Together, we can strive for a future where love, compassion, and respect are at the forefront of every relationship. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. Take care, and remember, the conversations we start today can pave the way for a brighter, safer tomorrow.